The following presentation is intended to promote a lively discussion among anesthesia professionals. It is not intended to provide medical advice. If you are a patient contemplating or planning for surgery, talk to your surgeon and your anesthesiologist. Follow their instructions for perioperative fasting. Now, grab some popcorn and a soft drink, and let's go to the movies! Oh, hi. I was just getting ready for a case. I'm glad you came by, though. I wanted to talk with you. You know, I've been doing some research on our peri-op fasting guidelines, and they're really out of date. We need to update it. I wanted to go to the department meeting this week, but I've got to go to the QCC meeting, so I was hoping maybe you could help me tell my story. Here, I got it all set up for you. Let me show you. Let me begin with a related story from my childhood. When I was a kid, my brothers and I would walk 8 blocks to the neighborhood public swimming pool. It wasn't as big as this one in New York City, but it was usually more crowded. But whether we were swimming in a pool or at a lake or anywhere, we always obeyed one very important safety rule. We could not go swimming if we had eaten anything within an hour. This was important. It was life or death. If you broke the rule, you put yourself at risk of developing a stomach cramp, a sudden, intense abdominal pain, rendering the victim unable to move their arms or legs in a coordinated manner. You would briefly flail before slipping below the waves with only a small trail of bubbles to hint to passerbys that a tragedy lay below. Of course, I don't know anyone that still believes this, but enough people did that in 2011, the American Red Cross came out with a scientific review in the International Journal of Aquatic Research and Education. They looked at the scientific literature and expert opinion and asked the question, does swimming within 1 hour of eating increase the risk of drowning in child or adult recreational or competitive swimmers? After considering all the evidence, they finally concluded that there is no evidence to support any link between eating before swimming and drowning. And they made the recommendation that food intake restrictions prior to swimming are unnecessary with a Class 3 level of evidence. Now, that silly rule really cost us a lot of good swimming time, didn't it? And kind of similarly, our perioperative fasting rules are also similarly out of date. They probably date back to the 1960s. But the new guidelines really tell us we should do something different. Let's have a look at it. First, let's look at what's good and bad about the guidelines we have right now. NPO After Midnight. Is that really the best policy for our patients and for our practice? Well, let's have a look at why we still hang on to this outdated policy. We have some good reasons for making our patients be NPO after midnight. First, it's simple. It's an easy rule to explain. It's easy to understand. It's one rule fits all. It's hard to get the instructions wrong. Second, it's safe. NPO after midnight is a very conservative policy. It's hard to argue with being even safer than ASA recommendations. And finally, it allows for flexibility. If that first big robot case cancels, no problem. You just call the next one in early and get right to work. So there's lots of ways that NPO after midnight is good for us. But NPO after midnight is bad for the patient. Oh, it's one thing if you're the 7:30 a.m. case, but what if your case isn't scheduled to start until 11 or 2 p.m. or 4 p.m. or heaven forbid that you're the 7:30 p.m. scheduled cystoscopy? Patients arrive hypovolemic. The nurses complain that starting an IV is hard. The patient's used up all their glucose. They've stopped converting glucose into glycogen, and now they're converting glycogen back into glucose until that runs out. Then they start burning fat and protein. Patients are hungry. They're thirsty. They're irritable, angry, even hangry. I've seen patients get upset and walk out at 4 in the afternoon because they've been delayed an hour or two, and it just doesn't make sense. There's no doubt, a blanket one-size-fits-all policy of NPO after midnight is bad for the patient. So how do we get from where we are now to something that's more appropriate? Well, let's start with the guidelines from the American Society of Anesthesiologists. The American Society of Anesthesiologists publishes practice guidelines for perioperative fasting, which were last updated in March of 2011. In terms of its authority, a practice guideline falls between a practice standard and a practice advisory. In this most recent update to the original 1999 version, 1,223 scientific articles were considered, and 158 of those were found to be relevant and included in the results. Also included were the opinions of 37 recognized experts and survey results from 471 ASA members. And these are the results that we are all familiar with, the well-known 2-4-6 rule. 2 hours for clear liquids, 4 hours for breast milk, and 6 hours for infant formula, non-human milk, and a light meal. Buried deep in the subtext is the additional time of 8 hours for fried, fatty foods or meat. Now notice, nowhere, anywhere in this document does it say anything about fasting from midnight before surgery. To get a clear understanding of how these guidelines were arrived at, we need to look at the discussion in each category. Let's start with clear liquids. The evidence for clear liquids is really good. They found 8 randomized clinical trials that compared fasting times of 2 to 4 hours versus more than 4 hours. The evidence shows that the patients who drank clear liquids within 2 to 4 hours before surgery had smaller gastric volumes and higher pH values, meaning less acidic, than the patients who fasted longer. So with that kind of evidence, you would expect the recommendation would be patients should drink clear liquids between 2 and 4 hours before their elective surgery. But no, the recommendation merely says, don't drink anything within 2 hours of surgery. Okay, I'm not arguing with their recommendation, but they seem to have missed the point of the evidence. Patients do better or are at less risk if they do drink a clear liquid in that 2 to 4 hour window. As published, the ASA guidelines are actually pretty sparse. Of the 17 pages in the article, almost 6 of them just tabulate consultant and member survey results. Much more detail is available in the Cochrane collaboration. This pair of reports, more than 300 pages in all, reviews mostly the same literature, but with much more analysis and discussion of results. For example, I learned that in the studies of clear liquids that we just discussed, not one of the studies looked at all at the effect of drinking clear liquids within the 2 hour window. So while we can say it appears that it is safe to drink clear liquids up to 2 hours before surgery, the evidence is silent about drinking clear fluids within that 2 hour window. In a lot of ways, we're working with a paucity of data. The Cochrane collaboration also looked at secondary outcomes, including thirst, hunger, pain, behavior, and nausea and vomiting. In every one of these categories, patients who drank clear liquids in that 2 to 4 hour window did better than those that fasted longer. There are no randomized clinical trials dealing with breast milk, but 4 observational studies on breast milk 4 hours before surgery were equivocal on the impact on gastric volume. So the consultants all agreed that a 4 hour fast was an appropriate fasting time for breast milk. Only one observational study addressed infant formula. Results of the 4 hour fast were, just like breast milk, equivocal. So the consultants recommended a 6 hour fast for infant formula. I can only conclude that breast milk is more politically correct than infant formula. The evidence is overwhelming that solids take longer to pass through the stomach. This graph illustrates the exponential manner of emptying for clear liquids. The T1/2 is about 15 minutes for clear liquids. Full liquids follow a more linear emptying pattern, and a full solid meal includes a dwell time of 30 minutes or more before the stomach emptying begins. Finally, gastric motility disorders like diabetic gastroparesis significantly slow emptying. The evidence shows that for healthy adults, a light meal of toast and a clear liquid can be safely eaten 6 hours before surgery. And for children, cow's milk should also be safe if followed by a 6 hour fast. So here's my policy proposal. Patients should be told that if their surgery is scheduled to start before 2 p.m., they should have dinner as usual the night before. They can drink unlimited clear fluids through the night, and they may continue to have clear fluids up to 2 hours before their scheduled surgery start. A good time to take that last sip is just before leaving home for the hospital. If surgery is scheduled to start after 2 p.m., they may have a light breakfast consisting of toast and a clear liquid, but they should finish breakfast before 8 a.m. They can then continue to have clear liquids up until 2 hours before surgery. It's important that we define for patients what constitutes a clear fluid. Of course, clear fluids are liquids you can see through. They include water, including carbonated water, black coffee or tea without milk or cream, soft drinks like colas or Sprite and 7-Up, sports drinks like Gatorade or Powerade, and apple juice or grape juice. Clear fluids are not milk, orange juice, or any juice with pulp, coffee with milk, cream, or creamer. Updating our NPO policy to something more modern carries some real benefits for it. First, it's well established, it's safe. It meets recognized guidelines, follows the ASA standards. Patients will be more physiologically prepared for surgery. They'll be better hydrated. They won't be in a catabolic state. And finally, patients are going to be happier. Thanks for helping. I know this new policy is going to be both safe for our patients and that our patients will be much more comfortable as they come to go through surgery. Your opinion really carries a lot of weight with everybody in the group, so I don't expect a lot of pushback. Let me know how it goes. Thanks again for your help.